Hi, so my name's Emma Kelly and I'm a visual artist based in Victoria, BC, and the show that I've had on recently is called Food Frustration, and it's a series of work that I've made over the last 4 years, and most of it's installation pieces, and they're made with the idea of the points of sort of the feelings and emotions that I have about my dysfunctional relationship with food. So the pieces have evolved since 2013, and inexplicably I woke up one day in the middle of summer in 2013 and decided I needed to make some work that had food in it that showed my difficulties with food addiction. I've been a full-blown addict since 2000. It's not a dieting thing, it's eating huge quantities of food, not being able to stop, being incredibly unwell, and it being really life-limiting. And I don't know why. I wasn't at college at that time. I hadn't even started at art school, but I felt this compulsion to make some pieces of work. So I've got 11 pieces in total here, and they represent different stages of my addiction and different moods and just associated facets with the whole struggle of having the disease, really. So, yes. So I'll start over here in this corner. And this is the very first piece that I made. It looks wonderful now, it's in a case, but at the time it was a big board with instructions on the side. And it's called Food Frustration and the Cycle of Change. And it's based on a smoking cessation model that was developed in the 1980s by 2 psychologists. And it's a simple idea, which a lot of people have heard of, the idea being that you're always in a process, at some point, wherever you are, in a process of change. So the idea is that this is a pre-contemplation area, then you're contemplating a bit more, then you're putting some activity towards it, then you've changed your behaviour, whatever it is, and then you're continuing that change, and then you relapse from whatever change in behaviour that you've made. And so this is 90 pots of varying food substances that represent my struggles with eating. So this area here, we've got binge foods, more binge foods, slightly less binge foods, relatively healthy foods, foods that I can eat when I class myself as abstinent, which is no sugar and no white carbohydrates. When I eat them, they're like rocket fuel in my system, and they make me insane. So, and then these are obviously the binge foods. So we're coming down here. So this model, it can be used for any form of addiction or sort of process behaviour that you might want to alter in some way. And this languished in a box for, I think it was 3 years. And when I moved to this space, to Errant art space, it seemed like a really good area to put them all in a cohesive group. And when I got this out, it absolutely stank. And I said to my friend, I'd like to fill this with greenery because it represents vibrancy and change and health. And she said, no, don't do that. Just leave them as they are, because all of these foods have not changed in the slightest over the last 4 years. But all these foods have, because they're live. So it's, yeah. And there's a diagram here which explains what everything is. And yes, and I really like that piece. It's lasted. I'm amazed it's lasted 4 years, but it has. So yeah. So this is called this is Food Frustration 3, and this is called The Madness in the Medium. And this was my attempt to stop myself binging on ice cream. So one of the things I'd do to try and stop myself binging would be to fill the cartons full of salt, because it would stop me eating them. It sounds insane talking to you about this. But I would go back to the cartons and I would check on them, and what I noticed was that this gunky matter would appear at the bottom of the carton, and then there'd be a foam at the top. And I don't know why. I was doing pointillism canvases before that with acrylic, and I just wondered if I could paint with it. So this is 3 different colours of ice cream, and this is chocolate sauce as well. So I mixed them with a tiny bit of craft paint, and yes, the ice cream that I used, which I can't mention the name of it. I saw a test online where they put 5 ice creams together to watch them degrade, and the ice cream that I used did not degrade at all over 6 months. So fortunately for me, binging on that crap, it was the best one I could use for the piece. So this took about 6 months to dry. I had an outside gallery, I had a garage space as a studio at the time, and I'd look around and there'd be wasps on it in the summer. So it's got about 30 coats of varnish and it's still very fragile, but as I say, yes, I enjoyed making it, and again, it's just about holding its own in terms of staying in one piece. So this is food frustration 6. This is called the Bertie Borstal. It's a very vibrant piece, and it was a lot of fun to make, and it's basically about family relationships, or relationships in my family to do around licorice all sorts. My mum was a big fan of them. My dad eats a lot of them, and I've binged heavily on them over the years. So, and the name comes from, in England, all sorts are made by Bassett's, and there's a little licorice man in each bag, and he's called Bertie. And in England, a juvenile correctional facility is called a borstal. So the idea is that you're trapped in here, and the only way you'll be able to get out will be to eat the walls, but you won't ever be able to do that, so the whole thing will collapse. Yes, I don't think you could make this up really good. And when I made this was 2014. When I made this, it was really difficult because trying to adhere sugar to any other mediums at all was really difficult. But again, this was in a box for a couple of years, and when I got it out, they all sorts of bone dry, and they're wonderful to work with as a tool. So if you ever needed to know that information, that's where you'll find it. So this is food frustration 4, and this is called the repetition is the mother of success. And this piece is about when I was diagnosed with food addiction and an eating disorder, I realised that actually my problems had started when I was quite young. And so I sat down and worked out how many days I'd been alive since the age of 8, when I think my problems started. And I wanted to visually represent this by, everybody has a doodle in them, this is my doodle, it's a spiral. And so all I did was I calculated the number of days and then replicated them in pen. And I think I went over the days early on in the process. But all this is just repetitive drawing with ink and changes in pen, changes in pressure, and then moving the piece round has actually created this texture, which I found really pleasing. So, I think things like this, when I've looked back at the work I've made, I've thought that it's actually really nice to have something pleasing come out of the experience rather than, it being a wholly negative one. So, yes. So this is a self-portrait that I took in 2010. This is my highest weight. I think I was 350 pounds, and I was so overweight I could barely walk, and I was on CPAP, which is continuous ambulatory pressure, and it's a mask that you wear at night to stop yourself having sleep apnea. And over the years, I've been an amateur photographer my whole life, but I've taken frequent self-portraits to try and galvanise myself into abstinence or action or doing something. And this one has actually stuck with me. I find it a horrendous image to look at even now, but I find that there's something really compelling about it. And in terms of the show, I find that gives this show a balance, because there's some humorous pieces, and this is more to do with actually, well, it's a bit of a bastard, really. So you can't believe that in. So yes, but I like it as a visual image. I find it very dominating, and it on its own it would fill the room. The other pieces wouldn't necessarily need to be here. So whether I like it or not, it works as a striking image. So this piece is called Fuckers, Food Frustration 2, and it's Fuckers 7400. And again, at the height of my addiction, which was 2010 when this was taken, I'd drive to the supermarket and I'd buy huge quantities of M&Ms at 3 a.m. and binge on them. So this was an attempt to try and show that in some sort of, but the process of working with a lot of these foods would be to the point where I could not stand handling them anymore because they were so repulsive, and it was helpful in that sort of sense. So this started off as a huge piece of board on which I had just stuck M&Ms in the letters, fuckers, but it sort of evolved into more of an art piece over the years, and I have Wendy Welsh at the Vancouver Island School of Art to thank for that. She was very supportive in my early attempts to make this piece, and it's actually come out really well now. I'm quite pleased with it. Yeah. Sorry. So this is Food Frustration 7. This is called E equals Raisin Head, and this is about love or unrequited love and my experiences of being self-trapped because I perceive that I'm unlovable for whatever reason, and it's to do with my weight. So this is basically a representation of being locked in or trapped, and the idea that somebody that I might find attractive or I might have a great relationship with, that they may be bound, may or may not be bound by the idea of my weight and it being a barrier to intimacy or to a relationship, quite simply put. Again, that's made with raisins. They were very difficult to manipulate when I made them. It's 2015. But again, wonderful when they're dried out. Marvellous. Just take your time with them and these things will prevail. So, yes. And I like this piece. I find it visually pleasing. I think it sits really well. And I was lucky to find the heads as well. So it's, yeah. Yes. Moving on. So this is Food Frustration 10, and this is called the 5 Stages of Bereavement. And it's fairly self-explanatory, which is to do with pizza. And I only made this a couple of weeks ago, and the ideas come very, very quickly. If anything, I've found it's the manufacturing of some of these things, which is incredibly difficult. And this involved really drying pizzas out, handling the materials, things that make me binge. And so it's quite a difficult experience and really quite insane. But I think it's worked quite well visually. So the idea is that you've got a grayscale here. Obviously, you move going from dark to light. You've got your first pizza, which is denial. And then anger, bargaining, just a small pizza. And then depression, which is everything, and then acceptance at the end. And that could be interpreted in either you've accepted the fact that you can't eat pizza because you're an addict and you can't eat bread, so there isn't anything. Or, as somebody pointed out to me the other day, you've eaten the pizza and you're thinking, right, I'm okay. It's not going to kill me. I'm not going to die. It'll all be all right. But I've had more feedback about this than anything else, and it's been interesting in terms of it's actually live because it's been quite hot in the studio in the gallery space recently, and I've come in and the pizzas have moved about, they've shrunk, dropped on the floor. It's horrendous, but you know what, you've got to do these things, haven't you? So moving on, this piece is called Black and White Thinking, and again I made this quite recently. I wanted to make a piece about blood glucose monitoring and the idea that candies look very similar to medications, and that relationship between the two of them, really. And this is really about my struggles with loneliness and isolation because of my size and my mental health problems that have come from that, and the fact, you know, you're traditionally propped up with a load of medication. And I suppose this is the party area to which I'm not privy. Yes, it's when you're sitting there and you're thinking, what's the colour of popular? That's when you realise you've maybe lost the plot a bit. So, but I really like this when it went up because I like the shadows on it, and it's quite simple, but it's really to do with the idea that change or addiction or anything things are not black and white. It's the grey areas where development happens and people can change, things can change, but there has to be less of that concretism, if you like. So yeah, and that's basically what that's about. This is a very small piece I did one day. Yeah, there have often been times when I've been really unwell where it's literally I've just thought, you know, that's all I've done is eat. And then somebody came to the opening and said, well, we all do that. We're all born, we all eat and we all die. And I suppose it's just levels of degrees, but that's just that feeling of complete alienation from yourself, or the ability to get over or to get on with your life because the addiction's overwhelming, really. So yeah, I like that piece. It's quite simple, so, and nice to draw as well. Yes. And then, well, that was the first incantation of fuckers. So that's what it looked like to start off with. As I say, it's been finessed a bit recently. And these are other pieces that I've made. These are just not part of the show, but they're, yeah. That's vegetable juices. This one was for a drinks competition, and it's actually soaked in Bombay Sapphire with tonic and lemon. It was Bombay Sapphire. It was a competition for artists. I never sent it in, but it was enjoyable to make. And this is the final piece, and again, this was just made recently. And this is called Nutritional Content. And basically it's vegetable juices with some ink, freeform. Jackson Pollock on a diet is what I would call it. And one of the reasons I really enjoyed making this was because we've just moved into this art space here, and it was quite engaging for some of the other people in the building to come and see what artists get up to in their lunch hour. So this is vegetable juices, which are beetroot, spinach, tomato, and some fruit juices as well. And I've done quite a lot of work over the last 2 years with the juices because they represent to me abstinence and health, but they're quite difficult to keep alive, keep the vibrancy, keep the colours. So this is, I suppose, the easiest way to do that, which is to put them on paper. So yeah, and a lot of fun to make. So yes, and that's it. That's my show. Thank you very much.